Okay, well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the webinar about protecting your organization while leveraging AI. So we'll start out this morning by doing an introduction of the speakers. I'll pass it over briefly to Keegan Brewer to provide a bit of his background. Then I'll provide you a bit of mine and we'll hop right into the substance. So over to you, Keegan.
Yeah. So my name's Keegan Brewer. I'm a full stack DevSecOps and machine learning engineer. I have about 10 years of experience building full stack applications. And I'm currently responsible for developing the AI ML model for Cytoploy's core agents, specifically focusing on our functional testing aspects. I hold a BS in computer science from UNCA, and I've been really interested in machine learning for the last 4 or 5 years. So that's kind of been my focus. And yeah, I'll hand it back over to Tina.
Right, great. So I have the distinct pleasure and privilege and excitement that comes with being an entrepreneur, as founder and CEO of both T-Secure and Cytoploy. I've been in the cybersecurity and technology profession for over 21 years. I started my career as a software developer and pivoted early in my career to cybersecurity, doing a lot of network security, computer forensics, load testing of various enterprise applications, et cetera. I've been a full-time entrepreneur for about the past 10 years. I still serve as a cybersecurity subject matter expert to various clients, and for Cytoploy, I lead the efforts for security, both organizationally and from a product perspective, with the product working very closely with our president of engineering, David Stedman. My background is as a trained computer scientist, a bachelor's in computer science, a master's in management, and a Juris Doctor. I'm a licensed attorney in the state of Maryland and bring to bear just some of the governance as well as technical aspects of security. So today we'll have a brief discussion about just an overview of AI, some of the compliance and regulations, and also securing AI in the real world. From an AI overview perspective, you can think of artificial intelligence as the use of machines and digital computing to imitate the actions or functions of humans, and even some cases optimize them. When you think of computers not getting tired as humans would, or perhaps being able to process larger amounts of data in shorter amount of times. Those are some of the advantages that artificial intelligence can provide. There are certainly several different disciplines and subsets underneath artificial intelligence, one of which is machine learning. Keegan, do you want to add any perspective on just an overview of AI and some of these subdisciplines?
Yeah, AI is kind of subdivided in a couple of different categories, machine learning being one of those big categories. Kind of the main focus of AI is trying to get machines to kind of necessarily build out complex readings without, providing the specific algorithm or instructions to do so. So that's kind of the machine learning aspect, is trying to mathematically use gradient descent or some other methodology to kind of reduce the error in these kind of results in incremental ways. And so as that improves, we can consider that to be learning. Well, it's traditionally similar to most other computer methods, not necessarily how humans might learn, but instead the minimization of error.
Great. So we provide just that overview to give some context of the discussion that we'll continue in today as we talk about both the opportunities as well as some of the challenges from a security and a privacy perspective with using artificial intelligence. So the current landscape from a compliance and regulations perspective, in talking to one of my colleagues prior to this meeting, is just an observation that perhaps compliance and regulations are coming, 10 to 15 years too late. There's certainly an explosive use of various tools and technologies around artificial intelligence, in particular with generative AI tools like ChatGPT. A lot of the artificial intelligence tools have, in the past couple of years, just really become household names and tools that are being used by the broader population, and not just by limited or isolated, larger organizations. So a part of that expanded use that has happened in recent years is why there's been an increased focus on compliance and regulations. So from a legislative perspective, even just in this recent 2023 session, at least half of the states and Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia introduced artificial intelligence bills. And 15 states in Puerto Rico adopted resolutions or enacted legislation. So that legislation that's been enacted in these various states in Puerto Rico have varying degrees of governance. Some of them, like in Maryland, where you'll see the legislation is really focused on Industry 4.0 from a manufacturing perspective. And within Industry 4.0 is the notions and capabilities around artificial intelligence and how AI can be used to further optimize manufacturing operations as a part of the Industry 4.0 revolution. And so it's less per se about privacy and security specifically, but it is concerned with the use of AI as a part of the Industry 4.0 revolution. So the legislation that you'll see in the various states in Puerto Rico have different focus areas, but nonetheless are starting to address various aspects, both the opportunity available with AI, as well as some of the challenges and considerations and caveats that need to be incorporated as a part of the development and use of AI. From a federal perspective, AI governance has come through an executive order, which is really hot off the presses. There was just a question about whether the states would beat the federal government with regard to AI governance. And while the executive order certainly is very expansive and a great tool around governance, I do want to just take it back to our three branches of government where we have our legislative, judicial, and executive, and point out that this executive order is not, through the legislative branch, but rather through the executive branch. And so just as a distinction there is that an executive order can control or be prescriptive with regard to how federal agencies can conduct themselves and potentially reach to the private sector through contracting or federal money that commercial entities may receive. So that is the means through which an executive order might extend some restrictions into the private sector. Is through and based upon the nexus that the private sector might have with the federal government, either receiving funding from it, contracting with it, et cetera. But an executive order most directly is able to control and govern what the federal agencies do from an executive branch perspective. So that just outlining that context, the executive order issued by that Biden-Harris administration has a focus on the safe, secure, and trustworthy use and development of artificial intelligence. You can read more. We have the link included here. And so when you're thinking about the safe, secure, and trustworthy use and development of artificial intelligence, as I've indicated, there's certainly a lot of advantages that come through using AI. But it's important to understand that artificial intelligence is still somewhat of a human creation, really, and it matters the data that you're using to train this AI. It matters how the decisions made by the AI are reviewed to ensure that there isn't bias or ill intent or incorrect information being communicated. And decisions being made when you start thinking about decisions that could be made, especially by governmental bodies, about individuals' life, liberty, or pursuit of happiness, something certainly very constitutionally protected within our democracy. Then you need to understand that AI requires governance in and of itself, especially when decisions are being made that impact the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness of the American population. So that's just a commentary on the compliance and regulations. We'll circle back to that a little bit as we do a wrap up with this presentation. So when we think about securing AI in the real world, some best practices, from an organizational perspective, one of the things that it's important for organizations to consider is when you have individuals within your organization that may be using various AI tools, it's important to ensure that you're looking at the privacy policy of that technology that you plan to use. So when you go to the website for using this technology, or if you're purchasing some sort of tool or subscription, it's important to see how that organization for that particular technology is approaching privacy and privacy protections. Another best practice is to be mindful of what you're sharing. So just using a common application that has quite a bit of notoriety, if you think about ChatGPT, it's certainly a great tool. You can ask ChatGPT a question and get an informed response back. But when you're asking that question, if you're using sensitive company information or personally identifiable information in your question, you certainly need to understand that data is being stored and being used by ChatGPT to continue its learning. And so Keegan will get into that a bit more about the implications of that. But it's important to know and understand that when you're sharing, it is something that's going into the knowledge and learning for that tool, and could be something that it uses as to inform its response to someone else who may ask it a future question. Another best practice is to ensure that you adjust the settings in whatever tool you're using. So just like with any technology, there are various configuration settings that allow you to control the security and privacy of your use of the tool. And so it's important to go in and see what configuration settings are available so that you can further limit the privacy or security intrusions that tool may have on while you're using the tool. Another best practice is to trust, but independently verify the information received from an AI tool. And perhaps it shouldn't even be trust, but just start with independently verify. Certainly, again, I'll emphasize that there is a great amount of benefit in using various AI tools, but it's also important to ensure that the information or response that you're receiving back is something that you verify. There are ways in which AI tools can be quote unquote poisoned. Again, Keegan will go into some of the challenges related to AI and large language models and just some of the concerns there from a more technical perspective. But when you're getting the data back from a ChatGPT or other AI tool, make sure that you take the time to verify that information that you receive before making decisions with it. Use additional technical controls like an AI relevant data loss prevention or DLP tool to enforce secure use of AI. So again, as organizations may be looking for various departments, marketing, consulting, et cetera, to take full advantage of various AI tools in order to enforce, from a more technical perspective, the limitation of sharing. There are some data loss prevention tools that can be used to ensure that employees are not able to over or inappropriately share sensitive information in using these tools. And Keegan will go into just some of the high-level comparisons or considerations around these tools. And lastly, here as a best practice is to educate your employees by having a clear policy and procedures that convey what is and is not allowable in the use or development of AI tools and technologies. So again, here are a couple of resources or sources that you can refer to for further information around best practices. And P-Secure and Cydeploy would certainly be happy to assist as well if you need additional guidance. Okay, so I am going to pass this over to Keegan to address AI in secure environments.
Awesome. So similar to what Tina was discussing in our last slide, there's a few things on how those best practices could be applied in our development practices. Specifically, one of the things that Tina mentioned, her second bullet point, was that you have to be careful of the information that you submit to these large language models. OpenAI specifically uses all the prompts submitted them to train future iterations of their model. You can specifically opt out of this by going to privacyopenai.com, which is why you should always check the privacy details of whatever tool you're using, because there are key informations on like how they utilize your information and the prompts you submit, or how to opt out of that. Specifically, I would like to pull attention to 3 Samsung employees that leaked sensitive company information to ChatGPT. Their methodologies was they asked, one of the employees asked ChatGPT to inspect their sensitive database code. So this is something that you might find from a lot of developers who submit their, source code or ask for, input from ChatGPT. They might submit some code to ChatGPT for review. So this is what one of those Samsung employees did. Later, that code found its way into other prompts and generations of advice. So while you provide your own examples of code, those code examples will be reiterated back to other people who might be outside of your company. So it's important to make sure what information you're sending into these chatbots, even if it's code or if it's the other employee sent, I believe the third one submitted a video for summation. One of their meetings they wanted to get a summary of, so they submitted it to ChatGPT. And the other one, they wanted source code errors. So they wanted to look at what errors were produced by these things and what they could kind of optimize away. So those three different employees sent, definitely two examples of source code and an example of a meeting that were all sensitive information that's made its way back into other generations by ChatGPT later on, exposing, secretive information from those. So when you are kind of utilizing these tools, it's important to utilize something like a data loss prevention tool. There are kind of a big difference between traditional data loss prevention tools and what is necessary for LLMs. So what's different about them? Generally, when you're using a data loss prevention tool, you are utilizing structured data. This might be, documents or CSVs or some other type of graph where your data can easily be structured and searched and, presented in these different formats. But large language models have the kind of unfortunate, issue is that they rely completely on unstructured data. It's all textual information being sent to them. So with this unstructured data, you might not be able to compare easily to documents or to, CSVs, because all of that information is textually embedded into the prompts. So when comparing data loss prevention tools, one thing to be notable of is whether they are a blocking or a redacting tool. So for example, a lot of new DLPs that are coming out will redact the sensitive information, but still send along your prompt to an LLM to be reproduced. And that will, while removing the sensitive information so it doesn't get into the LLM, will provide the LLM with enough contextual information to still be able to answer your prompt. Older DLP tools often block the entire use of the LLM whenever sensitive information is detected. So you might upload a file to ChatGPT to try to get it to summarize that document, and your DLP tool will say that this document is sensitive information and just prevent the upload altogether. So when you're looking at DLP tools in terms of LLMs, the blocking, both of them will prevent data loss, but the blocking versus redacting of the DLPs will, one, prevent the usage of the LLM at all, and the other actually allow the use without preventing, while also preventing the loss of sensitive information. So those are kind of the main things in securing your environments on top of those. Tina, if you present the next slide.
Let's see. There we go.
Awesome. So now just to talk about safeguarding again of the LLMs. One big thing is that we have to maintain who has access to these models. We should always be managing access, either with API keys or a login method or some other alternative auth methods, and always encrypt communication to these models. Oftentimes where you will have issues is either in your sensitive information being trafficked across the internet. If you are submitting to ChatGPT, you would want those communications to be secure so that even though you are trying to minimize the amount of sensitive information lost to the communication process, you should also not be susceptible to man-in-the-middle attacks. So always make sure that your communication to those models are encrypted. But managing the authorized access to them will also prevent misuse by people who are in your organization and might not, have the proper training to utilize these tools, or they prevent people from outside of your information who might stumble upon your model endpoints. So that's key in making sure that no unauthorized access is allowed. Another thing to prevent against misuse is we should talk about hallucinations and protecting other kind of misuse alternatives from these LLMs. Like Tina discussed in the slide before this one, we often have an issue with AI models not necessarily being accurate at all times. So that information needs to be verified. Oftentimes this is referred to as hallucinations. I prefer the term confabulation, which, if you don't know, is a neuropsychiatric disorder wherein a patient generates false memories without the intention of deceit. And similar to an LLM, these LLMs do not intentionally try to deceive you, but oftentimes are accidentally left without the correct information to be able to answer your query. And because LLMs try their best to answer your query, regardless of if they have the answer or not, they will provide maybe inaccurate information or information that is less than performative at that moment. So what can we do to minimize confabulations? Well, one of the big things is that like humans, we have to provide it not only memories and sensory information, we have to provide it a centralized knowledge graph. Our similar to humans, as I was making my point, LLMs have only the language context section, and we need to provide that kind of memory to provide that kind of centralized information storage. So one of the ways of attaining this is prompt injection. Oftentimes, you can feed additional information into the prompts of your models to provide them with additional information that is not yet provided in your query. Large language models have an issue with retaining information inside their neural networks. So providing this additional information on top of that so that they can utilize that information is a massive benefit to these models. So some examples of those kind of centralized knowledge graphs are vector databases. They allow you to search for contextual information and provide relevant information into your prompts. Another kind of utilization in minimizing confabulations and misuse is intentional training. Confabulations are often when they don't have enough examples of correct responses. So if you have known prompts and tailored responses you would like the model to be more accurate in responding to, that's often an example that you can kind of inject into your training data. For example, I wanted to pull attention to Do Anything Now, which is a large language model exploit. It's often shortened to DAN, but it allows you to ask the model specific questions and get untailored answers and responses away from these kind of things. So oftentimes you might have kind of dangerous information or misuse in terms of saying something along the lines of, ChatGPT, how can I build, a bomb or whatever? And you might want to prevent this misuse by creating tailored responses to those kind of known exploits. So you can provide some answer like, I'm incapable of doing that as I don't want to prevent harm, so that kind of information and can, special tailored responses would be nice. Anyway.
Okay, so we have addressed some aspects of how artificial intelligence can be secured. So the secure use of artificial intelligence, we discussed that, having different policies and procedures throughout your organization and some other best practices. And from a more technical perspective, how to secure AI, specifically large language models, from the capacity that it does have for hallucinations and confabulation. So that is what is generally described as security for AI. This slide here, we're doing just a shift into looking at AI for cybersecurity. And so that is the use of artificial intelligence to help organizations to better secure their environments. And one of the primary uses that have been identified, this is a report by Bain and Company, is that threat identification seems to hold the most potential for generative AI to improve cybersecurity. And that's where the industry adoption has been strongest so far. So threat identification is what is a precursor to, of course, threat mitigation, which starts with your containment, eradication, recovery, et cetera. But when you're looking at just the sheer volume that various cybersecurity tools, monitoring tools, threat hunting tools, SIM tools, security event and incident monitoring tools provide to organizations based upon looking at logs, looking at active attacks or activity on a network. there is a lot of data that is provided to human analysts. And so being able to leverage AI to analyze that data and to determine whether some activity on a network or within systems is an actual incident or security issue to be concerned with versus one that might just be a false positive and some noise. That's where AI can be extremely beneficial in identifying whether something is a threat or not. It can also, AI can also be used, as shown here in this particular graph, for containment of lower level threats that could be automated. Eradication. So again, after you've identified the threat, some of the different ways in which you can respond to those threats could be containment or eradication. When you get to the recovery aspect, there certainly could be recommendations that AI could provide around answering the question of how can we prevent this happening again? How can we recover now? And what can we do in the future? So you have your recovery and your lessons learned around the use of AI and improving both how your current systems are situated from a secure posture and also how you can handle and mitigate threats, future threats that may come. So when we think about looking forward with regard to both security for AI and AI for security, some of the things that we recommend you staying tuned about and even getting involved in is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, as they develop and publish standards around the safe, secure, and trustworthy use and development of AI technology. So just a reference back to the executive order that addresses this, NIST is certainly called out as having a role to help in developing that standard. And the typical process is that NIST will develop those and publish them for open comment. So it's important that various individuals are providing feedback as these standards are being developed. And it's important because from a protection of privacy and civil liberties, et cetera, perspective, we have such a diverse population within our country, and getting the perspectives of both senior SMEs and technologists in AI is just as important or no more important than getting the perspective and input from lay individuals that could be and likely will be impacted by these various technologies, especially as they increase in their use by government agencies. Again, government agencies are often the ones that control a lot of our rights and liberties. And so when you think about AI being used by law enforcement, already there have been multiple cases of law enforcement relying on AI in a way that resulted in incorrect incarcerations, arrests. And so, when you think about how we want to approach creating standards and what needs to be considered, we certainly need a broad swath of input on those standards. So certainly stay tuned for those standards as they come out. The other recommendation in looking forward is to plan ahead with your organization by creating AI governance policies. As with all technology, this is a fluid and a moving field. So it's not that your policy would necessarily have to remain static. But it really is important that as an organization, you start thinking through how you want to use and or develop AI in a responsible, fair, equitable, and secure manner. And by creating an AI governance policy, you can take the lead on informing your employees on the appropriate use and development if you're a development sort of organization, and ensure that you are taking a lead on protecting your organization's own sensitive information as you capitalize or leverage some of the great AI tools that are available to optimize your productivity. The last item here, and looking forward, is as we covered earlier, there's already been a lot of AI legislation proposed, some passed in different states, but there's certainly still a lot percolating, and I anticipate for the foreseeable future that there will be various iterations and flavors of AI legislation, both from a state perspective as well as a federal perspective. So one of the apps that I use, and I think is one of the most comprehensive in legislative tracking, is Plural Policy. So they have a free version for public use that allows you to search for different topics of interest around legislation at a state and a federal level, and get notices when there's different activity on legislation related to the particular topic of interest. In this particular case, artificial intelligence related legislation. So that concludes the formal part of our presentation, and we'd like to open the discussion up for questions in the remaining time that we have this morning. And feel free just to pose your question either in the chat or come off mute to ask your question. No burning or pressing questions?
I think there's already one in the chat. I'll read it out. What kind of unexpected failures may we anticipate considering the ongoing AI craze in respect to information security?
Okay, so I can take a first stab at that, and then certainly Keegan, if you'd like a follow-up. So in terms of unexpected failures, I interpret that to mean just cybersecurity can be looked at in three different categories. Normally it's the CIA triad, right? So we have confidentiality, we have integrity, and we have availability. And any one of those particular factors of cybersecurity could experience a failure if we have a over-reliance on AI that doesn't include some, I think, human consideration. So when we look at confidentiality, we've addressed quite a bit of that today, where if organizations are not mindful or don't have some sort of policy or technical control in place for using AI when they are attempting to get information or prompt an AI tool, the confidentiality of some of their secure information can be compromised by using those tools if proper precautions aren't taken to protect that sensitive information. So that's one example of a confidentiality failure in the use of AI tools. And some of that, you know, the onus may increasingly be put on the AI developer or vendor to help organizations protect themselves, right? We'll see how things ultimately play out, but for now, in the current environment, a lot of that onus is really on the organization or employees within that organization. From an integrity perspective, some of that comes back to what was addressed by Keegan. When you think of integrity, integrity is really the accuracy of the information and the ability for proper decisions to be made using that information. So when you think about hallucinations and confabulations, et cetera, that compromises the integrity. And that's a failure from a security perspective with regard to the information's integrity and accuracy and your ability to rely on it to make decisions. And then when we get into the availability aspect, I think there's a lot of different ways that AI could be manipulated by adversarial users to create various sorts of attacks in sophisticated ways that could result in a distributed denial of service, a DDoS sort of attack. Some of your mediocre hackers that perhaps couldn't create sophisticated code on their own to generate certain exploits or attacks. With the advent of various AI tools, they can now have their code made more sophisticated. If protections aren't put into place, as Keegan with known prompts and tailored responses, if some AI tools are not trained with known prompts and tailored responses in a way that says when someone wants to or gives code that looks like it's intended to perpetuate a distributed denial of a service or some other sort of exploit, if those tools or AI tools are not trained in that way, then they could be used by adversarial or malicious individuals to create exploits that could compromise the availability concern related to cybersecurity. So those are just some examples of the failures that of AI that could happen that could impede information security or cybersecurity concerns. Keegan, did you want to add anything there?
No, I think you covered it great. Yeah, the integrity, just the OpenAIs without or chat LLMs without the verification provides common faults in systems of reliability. So definitely what you were discussing with known prompts and that kind of vulnerability of those attacks, having one specific example that I might pull on to that is for companies like OpenAI that release a LLM to the public, specifically targeted attacks against OpenAI are made more susceptible based on the training and code that's presented by an internal organization to their LLMs. So if you have a publicly accessible LLM that is trained on your internal kind of knowledge base, then you might be susceptible to specific attacks that your LLM will prevent to other, or provide to other organizations that might be adversarial to you.
Okay. So our next, oh, go ahead, Keegan.
I was going to read off our next question as well. So from in terms of perfecting code, a company using internal versions of ChatGPT, since OpenAI version learns and uses code for public use. So instead of these companies are using internal versions, Microsoft Azure allows you to create your own internal version of ChatGPT, which is what a lot of organizations are using for those kind of code reviews. Additionally, through privacy.openai.com, you can also opt out of those utilizations, or also their API, if you utilize their model through that, is automatically opted out. So those are how companies are utilizing those tools without being susceptible to their information being lost.
Okay. And I think this next question is also one, Keegan, that you can address. Are there any known COTS DLP solutions that would provide a plug-and-play integration with common input sources like Word, Mail, VS Code, et cetera? I know that you have some perspective on some of the available DLP tools in the market.
Yeah. So like our previous discussion on DLP tools, there are kind of two main kind of distinctions between them. Older DLP tools that are pre-existing. One example I'm just going to pull off is ForcePoint. It has been a substantial DLP tool for many years. They, in their kind of implementation of it, add in an integration to kind of block all of that. So they are integrated into Word and Mail and VS Code. But what ForcePoint does when utilizing these LLMs is any sensitive information is prevented from being sent to the LLM to begin with. So that does prevent data loss, but it is also kind of restrictive to what information can still be utilized. There are other examples, something more like Cape Privacy or Polymer HQ, that kind of utilize the integration of Word and Mail and VS Code to kind of glean informations for their natural language processing, which then scans all of your documents, all of your mail, your VS Code kind of information to integrate that and determine what is sensitive information. And then while utilizing their specific tools, you have to use their integration of ChatGPT. You can't just directly send stuff to ChatGPT, but with their integrated tool, it'll scan your prompt, find that sensitive information, redact it, and then send along your prompt to the end LLM that you set up. So those kind of DLP tools, Polymer HQ and Cape Privacy, are much more integrated into your common applications and sources like Word, Mail, VS Code, but also allow the uses of LLMs with that redacted information.
All right. Do we have any other questions at this time? All right. Well, if there are no other questions, then we want to thank you for today. We'll put in some information here about how to contact both Keegan and myself with particular interest. So we can put there, I put my email address with T-Secure, and we'll put Keegan's address here with SciDeploy. If you have any follow-up questions, certainly feel free to shoot both Keegan and I a note. We'd be happy to support you with any of your organizational needs around policies or taking a secure approach for developing your own large language models. Thank you again for your time, everyone. Okay. I think it's just, Alan, did you have any last questions? May have stepped away. Okay, so I think we're good to go, Keegan.
Awesome.
Great job, and talk to you later. See you, Alan. Bye-bye.